Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to this. I'm trying to create a warm environment for sign language users and people with hearing loss that come into your agencies. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Anthony Adkins, and I am the program coordinator for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services program. I am also a peer support specialist here in Kentucky, certified now. And my role is that I am responsible to develop and help make sure that everyone has a communication access plan who deals with deaf, hard of hearing, and those with hearing loss seeking services. I'm also responsible to educate the various CMHCs, community mental health centers, on the importance of having and providing access for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, because there are a lot of barriers in people's lives that impact them. So we want to try to remove some of those when we can. And I'm going to go ahead and let one more person in the training. So now, as you can see, what does when your team talks about access to services, what does that usually mean for you all? What do you all see access to services as? What do you think that means? Okay, typically people respond and say that access to services means maybe transportation, the hours that the office is open and available, the individuals who themselves have hearing loss or who are deaf, they always for them, that's most important is access. And so we really emphasize access is not only just to get into the building, or individuals who are needing just ramps to access the building, or other sorts of, make sure that the lighting is good and the other types of accommodations. But for a deaf and hard of hearing person, what kind of access do they need? It could be for interpreters. It could be other sorts of accommodations provided. It could be computer aided real-time captioning. These are common symbols that you will see for communication access. And this allows individuals who are deaf or are hard of hearing, when they come in and they see these symbols, they know what services are offered. The first symbol that you see, it's the ear with the two lines above it. That's showing that you have the access for hearing devices. The one in the middle with the hands, that's of course for American Sign Language interpreting. The second one, the third one was CC. That is the symbol for closed captioning, which you may have on your Zoom call. You can have captions shown at the bottom or top of the screen, so you can see a printout of the words that are being spoken by the person. Sometimes it could just be written out or automatically generated, or you could have a person who's typing it out. The fourth one at the bottom is a video interpreter. And these days we use that quite often. We call what video remote interpreting or video relay services, VRS. And then the fifth symbol there, the blue box with the ear and the kind of a slash through it, that's to show that there are going to be other kind of modifications, maybe hearing aids or other types of auxiliary aids for hearing. So these are just some tips that we've developed for your wedding room, how to make it more accessible. Typically, you learn about like what accommodations an individual would need based on their hearing loss. For example, a person just walks into a restaurant or walks into a doctor's office or maybe even into an emergency department. They always are looking around and saying, there's nothing that really matches what I need here. So this is what we're trying to make sure happens for our deaf and hard of hearing people who walk into your waiting room at your facilities, to make sure that they do have access. For example, automatically turning the captioning on all of your televisions, just making sure that it's on. Even if there isn't a deaf or hard of hearing individual in the waiting room at that moment, just go ahead and leave it on. Also, make sure that the fire alarms that are available in your building are also visual alerting alarms. And I would like to add that usually for deaf and hard of hearing individuals or people who have hearing loss, they oftentimes are a little bit more anxious about certain things. Like, you have to be more concerned about your own safety. You have to watch out for yourself. It's an added stressor on these individuals to read other people's body languages to make sure that they're in a safe environment. And so having visual alarms is less anxiety. Have the magazines or possibly brochures and such with individuals who represent your clients, such as maybe a deaf individual, so that they feel that they are included in your information, that your information is always inclusive of a variety of diverse backgrounds, not just, oh well, here I'm having to fit into a hearing world again. It will just help them when they're looking for something or trying to find information to have sent to them. They want information that also relates to them. Try to have a system that makes sure that the person with a hearing loss knows that it's their turn, that they are being called for their appointment or to see whomever. That could be with signage. It could be with a plan to let them know, when we call for you, we will come and tell you that the interpreter is here or that it's your turn. For example, if there was a deaf or hard of hearing person or person with hearing loss in your waiting room, they come to the table, let you know, I'm here, I'm deaf, I've got a certain appointment coming up, whatever they do at the check-in desk. And then they may say, please let me know when you call my name. But then if the receptionist forgets, they get busy, they don't even think about that name. It happens, they forget. But then the people are sitting in the waiting room, and usually what they do is like, most people can just enjoy what they want to do. They can be on their phone, they can read a magazine, watch a TV show or whatever, and they hear their name called and they can just go up. But for a person who's deaf or hard of hearing, they can't do that. They have to do a lot more work in order to make that happen, to make sure they don't miss their name being called. So these are just some tips that are easy to do to make your waiting room more accessible for individuals who are deaf or have hearing loss, to feel more welcomed in your space. There are ways to have effective communication before your interpreter arrives, or if there isn't an interpreter for the session. Usually, an interpreter should show up before the appointment, maybe 15 to 20 minutes early. But of course, you can't predict everything. There are many things that could happen. Traffic could be horrible. Parking could be an issue. Maybe they had the wrong information and they went to a different facility or, a secondary address. Um, but if the deaf or hard of hearing person shows up early for their appointment before the interpreter arrives, this is what you could do to make the communication still effectively happen. If you have a whiteboard in your office, like a dry erase board that you could write back and forth with the deaf or hard of hearing person is, that is fine. You can do that as long as it's simple and to the point, just the main information. Just always say directly to the point, the main points of what you need to get across so that it's very clear to the person who's reading it. For example, if you can't write clearly, if you are unable to, then just ask another person in the office if they could write it down for you so it's easier to read. If you know basic signs, go ahead and try to use it. Because deaf and hard of hearing people are thrilled when they see sign language being used in the community, because it's like, yes, I can communicate in my language. I know a lot of hearing people are like, oh, I don't want to have to talk with deaf people, I don't know how to do this. But no, more than likely the deaf and hard of hearing people will feel very special because you're trying to make an effort to communicate with them in their own language. So it'll help you as well. Even if you only know your ABCs, we still appreciate it. It's better than nothing. I mean, it takes longer, yes, but it's still an effort. Make sure that you're maintaining eye contact with the individual. Don't be looking around the room or, looking down at the desk or at the computer, because then the person feels like, okay, you're too busy to deal with me. And that's something in deaf and hard of hearing culture, is that we value eye contact. So please keep eye contact. Smile and be friendly. It's simple. And then take your time. Just be patient. We're all in it together. So communicating with individuals who have a hearing loss but use lip or speech reading. Try not to cover your mouth when speaking. Don't hold papers in front of your mouth or face. If you have to use a mask, opt for a clear mask, which you can see two options in the pictures at the bottom of the screen on the left. Can you all see the clear masks or know what they're like? Yeah, okay. So that the lips are visible. And that can be effective with individuals who, read lips or speech read. Of course, there sometimes is fog, so you have to let that out, but it's still effective. Then on the right side, you see 4 pictures of words, and there are discrepancies on the pictures. Like, they make it a little bit hard for you to tell what they are, and it's showing you how can you read these even with these distractions on the word. So I can't hear you blank cov blank MOU, or one that's written backwards, or some that are missing the words. You can't see the words because they're lighter or darker. Imagine that would be the same as if you're trying to speech read or lip read through somebody who's not clearly showing their lips. I have another example. A person may tell me this, and if you try to read my lips, do you know what I just tried to say to you? I said, I love you. Or did I say, I love food? So on my mouth, when you read it, am I saying I love you or I love food? On the mouth, it looks exactly the same, you and food, but it sounds different when you say it. So a person who is trying to speech or lip read may have to use extra cues to figure out, okay, which one are they saying? Are they saying that they love me? No, they must be loving food. So they're trying to match what it looks like with what the context is of the situation. When I grew up, I had to take speech therapy lessons, and that was not my preferred way to communicate. It was a struggle for me because there's so many different words that have different meanings but they look the same on your lips. And so, oh my gosh, I'd have a headache and I'd be frustrated. My eyes just wanted to pop out. And honestly, it was easier to give up than to continue. I didn't want to have that relationship with my speech pathologist. And so, for the entire world who has speech and has hearing abilities to expect, oh, just read my lips, that's so unrealistic. That's why there are so many requests for ASL interpreters, because it is a clear type of communication, plus then our experience with having to go through speech therapy in the past. And of course, when there's medical vocabulary or other complex vocabulary, it makes it even harder to get that off of your lips. Are there any questions thus far? Okay, great. These are some options for the front desk to utilize for amplification. So there are individuals who use a variety of devices. Some you can get from online, some of them in the store. There is reimbursement available for getting these types of devices, but you have to pay for them first out of your budget and then submit for reimbursement later. There is a form that we can reimburse you all this for all of this equipment that you might purchase. This modification would be for amplifying the loudness of what is being said. So you want it to be louder so a person could hear what is being said. And these are RF power amplifiers. There are also transmitters that you would need in order to send the sound from where it's being received to the person who's listening. So they will have an electronic device with an input to, like, from a microphone. And then you have what is called the 2.1 voltage amplifier, which increases what you're saying. So the input that you're giving it from the microphone gets increased. And then you have the 2.2 current amplifier that increases the input current, which then goes to the 2.3 power amplifier, which increases the input power. So again, these types of devices can be bought at Amazon. They can be bought at other types of office supply companies. If you're not sure, you can always reach out to us and we can recommend the places to buy them. But again, these are all reimbursable after you've already purchased them. Any questions about these types of amplification modifiers at the front desk?
Nope.
Okay, great. So as we just talked about speech and lip reading, look at these pictures. Let's see if you think, like this first picture, the gentleman with the interesting white mustache and the little patch at the bottom. Do you think that'd be easy to lip read or speech read? No? Why don't you think so? Why isn't that not easy?
It covers the top lip. The hair does.
Right, it covers the top lip. Right, and some of the bottom. What about the second picture? The man with the red beard and mustache, kind of reddish. I mean, that one covers his entire upper lip as well, so that would be very difficult to lip read. What about the last person on the first line? So I'm going to show you, you have two women that use lipstick. One may be the very dark blue, then the second one you have is very bright red. Do you think those would be easy to lip read?
Would the bright red be easier? But
yes, the bright red would be easier. And then of course Nicole commented in the chat, thank you, that it would also be distracting. It would be distracting when you're trying to read it. A lot of deaf and hard of hearing individuals have to deal with a lot of distractions. And, we think, oh, it's no big deal to put on a little lipstick or extra, just because that's part of our personal expression. But at the same time, when you're dealing with people who have to, rely on your lips for communication, sometimes it's better to kind of wipe that off or blot it off if you already have lipstick on. Or if you're unsure, just ask the individual, are you able to read my lips clearly with this, or do I need to help you? That shouldn't be offensive. And if they ask you to remove it, they're not trying to offend you, but they're trying to better communicate and understand what you are saying to them. It's not that they think that, oh, it's just horrible lipstick. It's for a purpose. It's not intended to be an offense. Also, just to let you know, in deaf and hard of hearing cultures, we are much more upfront and blunt. We are not meaning to be, offensive or try to, put you down or anything. It is just something that is culturally accepted by each other, and therefore that's how we usually interact in general life. Obviously, the last picture there with the gentleman with the salt and pepper beard, that's a very thick beard and it covers both of the top and lower lip. So usually facial hair is not very conducive for speech or lip reading. Also, if I have a male interpreter instead of a female interpreter, I usually, when I'm using an interpreter, will watch their signs off their hands as well as how their mouth is moving. So even with a male interpreter, I always ask for a trimmed male interpreter. I'm not asking them to shave their face. I wouldn't go that far, but just kind of be nice and trimmed so that I'm able to see everything and get as much information as possible. And there are people who can lip read and do every day, but they're still only getting about 35% of the message from the lips. The other 65% is from other cues that they're getting not on the lips. That's a lot to be missing and guessing about. And also those who can lip read but still have maybe some residual hearing and are not completely deaf, they also have it even more complex because then they're hearing your different accents and then trying to match them with what your lips are saying. So it's even more work for the person. Any questions about this? Okay. So when an interpreter does arrive for the appointment, it is very important. There are key things that you should tell the interpreter when they arrive. Let the interpreter know where the restroom is. Let me back up why I think that's so important. The interpreters themselves could be a staff interpreter that is sent, or it could be what is called a freelance interpreter. So they may go several different locations, several places throughout the day. And so they're always looking for a restroom because they're in between jobs and it's like, so oftentimes before the assignment, the interpreter will be like, can I use a restroom, just to kind of have a place, even if they just want to wash their hands. Plus then, gas stations, the way they are, you never know. Sometimes they may be running late or just right on time. And so using a restroom sometimes is the first thing the interpreter will request to do. Also, one thing that we try to do with the interpreter is you don't necessarily want that interpreter to be staying there kind of doing that dance, while they're doing the interpreter. Just go ahead and let them get their natural need out of the way so that they're not doing some funky dance in the middle of the appointment. The interpreter could either sit in a different waiting room at your facility, or it may be more appropriate for the interpreter to sit or stand in the hallway and wait. The reason why we don't want the interpreter in the main waiting room with the deaf or hard of hearing individual, some people do that. Some people say, yeah, that's fine, I don't mind. But most of the time, it's best practice if they could be in a separate room or in the hallway until the appointment actually begins. Part of that is because from the deaf individual, they may see it as one thing, an interpreter may see it as another, but then the provider may think, oh, why are you all sitting together? When the interpreter arrives, let them know any updates that we need to then relay to the deaf person, such as scheduling issues, or maybe the provider is running behind. Most importantly, it's important to let the interpreter know about any safety issues in the building. For example, if the building has hired a construction worker that's coming and they're saying, hey, they're going to be working on this, it's going to be really loud, or people are going to be walking around you in the hall, whatever reason, just any sort of safety issues, make sure you're keeping that contracted interpreter abreast of it so that they're comfortable in the space, instead of having to figure out, okay, am I in the right place? Do I need to be here? Do I need to be careful? That sort of thing. If you have many locked doors at your facility, make sure that the interpreter knows where they can get a key or get access. Maybe you have it where they always have to go to the front desk, or there's somebody who has it in a certain drawer, or it's in a, hanging on a certain key hook behind somebody's desk, what have you. That way the interpreter knows how to get in. It is our responsibility as the providers to make sure that we are providing effective communication for all of our services. So the first comic strip on this slide, you can see the father who is deaf, and he has his son who is not deaf, who is hearing. And he comes in and he comments. He's due for a shot. That's fine, go ahead. So yes, I wanted to make sure it's the deaf father or hearing father, and then there's the son that is on the table. So the father, the father says yes, go ahead and give him the shot, but then the boy signs stop. No, the interpreter made a mistake, and my dad said I don't need the shot, because of course kids don't want shots, but it's the child. The child is not the interpreter. Sometimes they will try to fool you. Like when we come in, for example, you go into your exam room with the doctor and you're making comments about the history, and yes, I want the child to have the shot. My kids, when they were raised, they were like, no, I don't need it. And the doctor was like, what? No, yeah, you do. And so the doctor would actually listen to the hearing children, to my hearing children, before listening to what I said, that I said I wanted them to have the shot. And my kids are like, I don't want the shot, so I'm going to tell them no. I'm the one that authorized the shot. I'm the parent. So doctors are more comfortable just relying on their ears and hearing the kids say, no, dad said I don't need a shot, instead of trusting what was being said by the father. So I just want to emphasize that. Careful where you get your information. Like I commented previously about lip reading, the second comment illustrates, can you read my lips? And the deaf person goes, should I say yes or no? Especially with those who are hard of hearing, because it's a common question to be asked. Can you read my lips? Everyone asks us if we can read your lips. So we know that that's the question that you're asking, whether we actually read it or not. We know that's what you're asking. So then in the second picture, it's like, if I say yes, I can read your lips, the person just starts talking a mile a minute and everything gets, gumbled all together, and I can't read what their lips are saying. I mean, usually I can, but this 65%, there's no way I can understand it, right? So please ask the individual first if they are able to, or would like to try to read lips. Don't assume that they want to read lips and that that's something that they are able to do. If they say, no, I'm unable to read lips, please get me a sign language interpreter, then do so and make those accommodations until you can get an interpreter. If you need to write back and forth, simply and easily, that's fine. But don't just assume because they can answer a question of, can you read my lips, that they really can read your lips for everything. Any questions? Okay. Oh, question in the chat. Nicole asked, if they are able to read lips, do we just speak slowly? Well, with that, during the time that you're first getting to know the person and you're trying to figure out exactly what is working or what have you, that point you might want to try, but just follow the cues that the person is giving you. Does it look like they're not understanding you? Maybe you're going too slow. If they look like they're not understanding, maybe you're going too fast, so slow it back down. Kind of play with that just a little bit to establish that communication as best as you can, and then you can go from there. Because if a person does say, I want to, I'll just speech read, even if it's a stupid question, just ask them, do you want me to slow it down? Do you want me to speak as I normally would? Because you're ensuring that a communication is effective for them. So you're just emphasizing the fact that I'm not interrogating you. I'm just making sure that communication can be effective for both of us. Did that answer your question or any others? Okay, great. There's another question in the chat. Are there other ways to make lip reading easier, or something that we, like talking slower can make it? That really depends. Similar to my last comment, ask the individual what they need. Some people just want you to speak as normal. Some people do want you to slow it down. Some people just need you to repeat it. So it just depends on, if you see that that person is getting really frustrated, it may be best just to grab a pen and paper and write it down, because you don't want to, further aggravate the situation. Hopefully that answered your question, Kellyanne. Okay, great. Now, when you have a deaf or hard of hearing client and you're calling to remind them of an appointment, as most offices do, if it's allowed, use email or a text reminder rather than a phone call reminder. But when you do the email or text, make sure that you're letting the person know that it's already confirmed that there will be an interpreter for their visit. And if you have it, go ahead and give the interpreter's name. That way, by giving the interpreter's name, the individual has the opportunity to say, "Ooh, I have a conflict with that person." Or from prior experience, this individual and we do not communicate well. Because the deaf community is very small, the interpreting community is even smaller, and we know each other. So a deaf person may not feel comfortable with that interpreter, especially in a mental health situation when you need that confidentiality and that neutrality. So you really need to make sure that the deaf individual can trust the interpreter that's coming for your appointment. Otherwise, it's not going to be effective, because if the deaf person is concerned this interpreter already knows too much about their life or what have you, or could possibly tell their information, they're not going to be as forthcoming and willing to participate in their sessions. When you have a list of interpreters, or start to develop, okay, we have like 5 interpreters we use, ask your deaf or hard of hearing client if these interpreters are acceptable or not. And if they choose that one of them is not supposed to be called for them, honor that request. Don't make that deaf person have that interpreter. Use one of the other ones. But again, call and remind your client of their appointment, let them know that there's an interpreter and who the interpreter is going to be. Hopefully that follows their requested list. What else did I want to say? Oh, yes. So when you're meeting with your client, always ask the client if they want the ASL interpreter. Then you can ask them to go ahead and give you a couple of names that they may prefer. Again, it's natural that interpreters work with certain clients routinely in certain settings, but not in other settings. And it depends because not all interpreters work in all places. So if the deaf person can say, yes, this is an interpreter that I would like to use, or these are a couple that I would like to use, it's nice to go ahead and make note of those. And then if you ask all of them and none of them are available, then you may have to go back and renegotiate with the client and say, I've tried, but these aren't available. If it's an ongoing appointment, so something that's maybe weekly or bi-weekly or something, it is best practice to have a consistent interpreter. Try to have the same interpreter for every appointment, or maybe one or two rotating out. Part of that is just because the interpreter will be able to have that prior knowledge of what was already said or what's being worked on. They'll know the names that are being discussed, some of the more common issues, and the signs that the person uses. So it just makes it a lot easier to go forward. Okay. Have you all already experienced a phone call with a deaf individual? Maybe raise your hand if you have. Okay, Ashley. All right. So if you haven't yet experienced a phone call from a deaf person, this is kind of what it looks like behind the scenes. So there's a deaf individual who will own a device. It's either a video phone or camera, a special camera that they use that allows them to call either another deaf individual directly who also has a video phone or the special camera, or they can call a hearing person who is an interpreter and then acts as the conduit for the telephone call with a non-signer. So that's how this works. Just like I have an interpreter on the screen with me here today, they would be in a different place for the person making the phone call. All right. Any questions related with the video relay service, VRI, or how it works? Okay, so deaf individuals use video relay service as just part of everyday life. It's something that they're very common and familiar with. But oftentimes hearing individuals have no idea about this technology or actually how it works, how to use it. So there is funding for for deaf individuals to be able to use these phones to make their phone calls to or from a deaf person to be able to connect and make regular phone calls. So a deaf person making a phone call would call through the interpreter on the video phone. Then the interpreter would see the person on a screen and have a landline telephone that would then make the hearing call to a hearing non-signer. The deaf person is the only one that sees the the interpreter on the screen, and the hearing receiver of the call doesn't, of course, see a screen, but only hears the interpreter's voice. I'll just let you know that when you are on a relay call, just speak normally. You don't need to, tell him, tell her, just speak directly to the client as if the interpreter weren't there. For example, if I am speaking with a person who doesn't know anything about deafness or deaf culture, oftentimes they will tell the interpreter, tell Anthony this, it's not the interpreter's responsibility to tell me that. It's their responsibility to just interpret what you are saying to me. So the interpreter will say, tell Anthony this. That's very common. That's something that happens more than I would like it to do. Tell him, tell Anthony. And it's like one of the bigger pet peeves that we as deaf individuals have. Don't tell us, just tell us. So that's one tip for phone calls through VRS. Also, the deaf individual themselves can decide whether or not the interpreter announces themselves or not. Sometimes you will receive a call from a deaf person and you'll hear right away, the communication just goes right in. Hi, I need to make an appointment, a follow up, whatever. And that means that the interpreter did not take a second to announce. Whereas other calls, a deaf person will say, please announce. And the interpreter will say, this is interpreter XYZ from such and such a company, and you have a caller who is deaf on the line. I'll be interpreting for you. That kind of thing. And I want to emphasize to you all and let everyone, anyone who knows or who works in your agency with life skills and such, anytime they hear something like this, just let you know I have another person on the phone. And then you guys always, not just you guys, but a lot of people will hang up the phone because you think it's a scam. Oftentimes it could be. But again, the deaf person has the right to choose to announce that they're using an interpreter or not. So we emphasize, please respect that decision. Maybe listen a little longer. The VRS number, the phone number that goes directly to that deaf person's video phone, is only for deaf individuals. These numbers are actually regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. So that was for signing deaf individuals, but now how do you talk to a person who has a hearing loss on a phone? Again, speak directly to the individual on the phone. Make sure that your mouth is placed close to the receiver of the mouthpiece, not, like down under your chin or holding it away from your face. Speak at a normal speed. Make sure that you're using an appropriate volume. Don't speak a lot softer, or don't speak so much louder, because then that'll blast them out. And try to call from a quieter place. If your waiting room is where your front desk is and it's very crowded with like a new group coming in or something, that may not be the best place to be making a phone call to a person who's hard of hearing or has trouble on the phone, because they may not be able to hear with all that background noise. Also, plan ahead. Try to make sure that you're scheduling the interpreter or the captioned, excuse the interpreter, computer aided real-time captioner ahead of time. That way, if you just go ahead and make the appointment for the client's follow-up right after their current appointment, go ahead and make the appointment for the interpreter or the cart provider. And the reason you want to go ahead and do it and not delay it, because usually those agencies are booked 3 to 6 weeks in advance. We need to give them time to look for the appropriate interpreter for that client that you have. When you are making a request for an interpreter, these are just some things that you need to let the agency know. You can either, most places, call or email your request in. Most of them accept either way to get your interpreter. You need to put down who is the requester, so usually your name. What is the date of the request that you have? What is the time that it is supposed to begin and the time that it should end? Now, the starting time and the end time is important to let them know. If you want to have the interpreter show up a little bit early for the appointment, maybe you need to have a pre-session between the interpreter and the provider. You want to make sure that the setup is okay, that, if there was something that's happened in the past with another interpreter that you need to give the current interpreter a heads up about, you may need to ask them to arrive 15 minutes earlier so that you can do those pre-sessions. Also, if you do need to rearrange the room so that it's visually accessible for everyone, that's important. That way they have that time and they don't eat up the session time. Next, you need, of course, the client's name, the consumer's name, and then also what is their need? Do they need an interpreter or do they need a captioner? Also, what kind of interpreter they may want if they have a specific request. Also, describe what kind of an appointment is it going to be. If you just say, well, it's just a follow-up, what kind of a follow-up? Is it, the interpreter needs to know, what is the follow-up for? Are we doing a follow-up of medication or a follow-up on, a recent diagnosis, or, because maybe the interpreter that comes isn't qualified to do that kind of topic. So we do need a little bit more of a description, more details of what's going on so that the interpreter can assure that, or the agency especially, can assure that the interpreter that they're sending is going to be confident in that topic. Especially if it's something very complex or something that seems to have been issued before, you want to make sure that, you have made the appropriate accommodations and the interpreter, for example, if you're discussing things that are going really in depth and are heavily traumatic or something, the interpreter may need to know that so that then they don't get triggered or, cause issue in that session. So again, it's just important to do that communication. The final tip that we would like to say is make sure that you inform them if you want them on site, on location, or if it's going to be virtual. If it's going to be virtual, go ahead and send the link immediately. And if it's going to be on location, make sure you give them the appropriate address. If you have parking instructions, a suite number, which entrance to use, if there's a certain door number, when they get there, who's their contact going to be? Do they need to check in at the front desk? Or do they need to try to contact the provider directly? Those kinds of information. So in the chat, yes, we do have emergency interpreters. If you call the suicide crisis line 988, text or email, there are on-call interpreters. Of course, deaf individuals could make a decision to go with a direct communication, such as using a deaf provider on those hotlines. They did develop an actual number specifically for the deaf and hard of hearing to use to get a video phone to be able to call that number. Yes. Did I answer your question, Kellyanne? Making sure. So previously we talked about requesting an interpreter. The same would be very similar for requesting a captioner. You need to make sure that they have the details necessary to know if they are going to be able to provide the appropriate service. With the captioner, are they needing to bring like a large screen with them, or do they need to maybe only bring an iPad with them? What kind of a room is it to be set up? Do they need to bring like their own little power cord or something? What kind of vocabulary is going to be used in the session, especially like medical names or diagnoses or any sort of particular spellings? That would be important to let the captioner know ahead of time. For example, Kellyanne, your name isn't exactly the most common, with it being two words put together, but a captioner, when they put it in their system, will want to make sure that they code that for a specific keystroke so that it comes out as one name instead of Kelly and then Ann. So any of that kind of information that you could provide for the CART provider ahead of time means that they just already have that built into their system and they'll be ready to go when they first arrive. Okay. Quiz time. We're almost at the end. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and have you all answer, please not in chat, but if you can go ahead and answer, you can say true or false. So T or F. First question, lip reading is the easiest way for a deaf person to communicate with a hearing person. True or false?
False.
False.
False, correct, false. Second question, paperwork to fill out or have signatures to process, that's okay to do without an interpreter.
False.
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 Why do you think it's false?
If they have questions about specific policies, they wouldn't be able to request clarification.
Exactly. That's a good answer. Yes. Just to point out, with hearing individuals, you know, you all are hearing and picking up incidental information all day long, every day, for a variety of reasons and for different purposes and topics. Whereas deaf individuals are basically only bringing it in through their eyes, and they only get exposed to sign language every once in a while, or if, you know, they're lucky and they're always with other deaf people. But it takes a lot more time to do that processing of meaning of words that they may not see all the time, or may not have seen them put in the sentence order that they are in. It's not something that they see every day or do every day. So it's best to have an interpreter to put that into a language that is more readily understandable for the deaf person. And that way they can make sure that they fully understand it. Okay, the next one, number 3, interpreters always provide the best access for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing.
True.
I want to say false, maybe.
Well, maybe no, it would be the deaf person that's the best access, but it would almost have to be the interpreter that would be better, like to help convey what the deaf person is saying.
Right. Okay. So an interpreter focuses mainly on deaf, yes. But hard of hearing individuals, they do know some sign language, but it would be their decision whether or not they prefer to use it or not, if they may want to just use their own voice and residual hearing. I have noticed that there are some that always request an interpreter, even if they're able to speak and hear some for themselves, just because they want to make sure that they have full access. So most of the time, I would say a higher percentage, it is still best to have an interpreter, even with a hard of hearing person. But the answer is true. And then number 4, how well a deaf or hard of hearing person reads or writes English is a good indicator of their intelligence.
False.
False.
Correct. Thank you. Yes, I explained that before. Yes. Yes. Okay. I'm done with the PowerPoint portion of the presentation now. Okay. Are there any specific questions I may not have covered?
Where would be the best place to start to learn basic ASL?
Okay. There are many different resources that you can access. I would look at colleges and universities, community centers. There are some online that are offered. Usually there's also mobile apps that you could download. I could send an email with a couple of resources, especially of apps that you could use to learn some basics. Or if you know someone who is deaf or who signs, you could also ask them if they would teach you some. If you commonly work with a deaf individual, I mean, you could ask them, hey, can you, come and teach me a couple, like, how can I ask you how your day's going or something like that? A lot of people will be willing to teach you that and help you along.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Any others?
I have another. Is finger spelling considered ASL?
Finger spelling typically is like a good start to get into ASL. If you want to have a conversation with someone, be able to ask and answer a lot of questions, don't finger spell at all. That's tiring for both. I mean, deaf and hard of hearing individuals, yes, we use finger spelling, but it takes up so much more time. But if that's the only thing you can do that. Or, if you don't know any other signs, you could. It is a beginning. For example, if you learn your ABCs, the alphabet, and you try to practice by yourself, trying to think of a good example. If you're just doing phone, P-H-O-N-E, P-H-O-N-E, P-H-O-N-E. It's like, well, why am I spelling 5 letters when really all I have to do is look up a simple sign for what the sign for phone is? Or next time the client comes in, what's the sign for P-H-O-N-E? And they show you, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, it's holding a phone up to my head where my ear and my mouth is. Okay, so it's kind of like why would you expend that much energy to spell the words when it would be easier to do one sign rather than several letters? All right, then. We are done with the training. If there are no more questions. If something pops up or, comes up in the next couple of weeks or months or whatever, anytime, just email me. I'll be happy to answer. I will also go ahead and send this recording to you all and to Sherry as well. And I think that it probably will be on Monday by the time that I can process, because tomorrow I'm in an all-day training and no. So it will most likely be on Monday that I will finish the processing and send it off to you all. Okay. All right. Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
you.
Hope you all have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.